Hello and welcome to my Warden leveling spec. Now I'm specifically calling this a Warden leveling spec and not a Cleric leveling spec because this is a leveling spec that's specifically designed for healers. Anybody who wants to be able to heal, be a main healer in an instance or dungeon or rifts or what have you without having to respec. But they still want to be able to level their Warden, so they want to be able to solo and they want to be able to heal without having to respec because hey, as healers, we know just instantly respecking into a healing spec can cause a lot of wipes. And so this gives you the best of both worlds so that you can learn how to heal, learn how to handle a healer spec while you solo so that the moment you're ready to pop into a dungeon, if you like to group while you're leveling as well, you'll be ready. Also, it makes for a very easy transition at level 50 when you're ready to switch into a full-on Warden spec. Now this is a low damage spec, but it is very survivable and it's very easy on the mana, so you'll find after level 20 or so you're not going to be drinking a whole lot, so it can save a lot of time. So it's not the fastest way to level a cleric, but it is very efficient and not nearly as slow as you might assume. And I think you'll find that it's not nearly as slow as maybe your experience with trying to level healers in other games, which, based on my experience, has always been painfully slow compared to other classes, and that's not really the case here. Okay, so there's just a lot to cover here. There's a lot of powers, and so I'm going to have to skip by things kind of quickly at times. So I just want you to know there's going to be a lot of what are considered to be fantastic offensive powers that I'm just going to disregard. When I say that I'm disregarding something, it's not because I don't think it's a great power per se. It's just not going to work with this spec, and usually the reason it won't work with this spec is because of either a long cast time or too much potential for interrupts caused by pushbacks, or, a channel just doesn't work out very well when you're getting beat on by 2 or 3 people. So that's why I'm disregarding. It's not because the power couldn't be great, it's just because with this build, it's not great. Okay, so my first soul is Warden, and this gives me my primary single target heal, Healing Spray, and instant cast heal over time. I also get Water Jet, which is a very deceptive attack that a lot of players probably disregard due to its low burst damage. But Water Jet will actually be my primary attack throughout because even though it feels like I'm not doing a whole lot of damage with it, the instant cast of this spell with no recharge actually gives it the best base DPS among all of the basic attacks in this build. Now my levels 1 and 2 points go into Destructive Tide, which increases the damage of my instant cast spells by 2% per point. And this opens up the ability Healing Current, which does some burst healing and additional healing over time. Okay, at level 3 I take my second soul, Inquisitor, and that gives me Bolt of Judgment and Vex. Now, I want to stress that Bolt of Judgment appears better than Water Jet for DPS, as do a couple of other things, but it is not unless you deviate from this build to take talents that enhance it, and so this is going to be disregarded. Vex, on the other hand, is an awesome damage over time that is instant cast and has no cooldown. So I make sure that if I'm fighting multiple mobs, I get Vex ticking away on all of them. So I put my first level 3 point into Destructive Tide and my bonus point into Inner Focus, which will increase the crit chance of my damaging spells. My level 4 point goes to Destructive Tide, which opens up Crushing Wave. This is a weak attack with a knockback, so it can help you early on against multiple mobs, but basically I ended up forgetting about this and disregarding it. My level 5 talent finishes Destructive Tide, and at level 5 I get my third soul and go with Kabbalist. This opens Shadow's Touch, which does decent single-target damage as well as minor damage on up to 3 additional mobs, but this is not an effective solo power, and so I'm going to disregard this. My first level 6 talent point goes to Surging Rapids, which increases the effectiveness of my instant cast heals by a whopping 3% per point. My bonus point goes to Inner Focus, and this opens up Sanction Heretic, which is one of my most powerful spells. Now, this does more burst damage than Water Jet, and it does considerable damage over time as well. My level 7 and 8 talents go to Surging Rapids, which opens up Tidal Surge. Tidal Surge is one of my oh crap buttons, which will increase the effectiveness of my next healing spell by 50%, and it is not impacted by the global cooldown, so I can hit it in between casts. Now, I won't use this much yet, but this is an exceedingly effective spell later on when I get Deluge. Level 9 goes to Surging Rapids, and my bonus point goes to Stroke of Genius, which increases my spell power and is also very true. Thank you very much. At level 10, I finish off Surging Rapids, and this opens up Cleansing Waters, which removes a curse, disease, or poison, as well as track water creatures. My level 11 and first level 12 points are going to Fluidity, which increases the effectiveness of my healing over time abilities, and this opens up Healing Flood, which is my first multi-target heal, which I'll be using on myself as I solo as well. Now, my bonus level 12 point goes to Stroke of Genius, which opens up Distorted Shadows, which is worthless to me as a soloer, so I'll be disregarding this. My next 3 levels go to Fluidity, and this has opened up Deluge, which does massive healing plus bonus healing for each heal over time that is active on the target. Now, this is more or less an oh crap spell, again, due to the 2-second cast time, and I make sure to use it when I have a minimum of 3 heals over time active, and usually after I use Tidal Surge. This spell becomes much more effective after I get Soothing Stream later on. Now, my second level 15 talent goes to Stroke of Genius. Thank you very much. At level 16, I'm taking Orbs of the Stream. This is an ability that puts 3 orbs on my target, which is usually me, that heal me as I take damage. Now, each orb does a massive amount of healing, so this is an ability I use on myself or my group's tank pretty much whenever it is off cooldown. Now, the orbs actually last for 4 minutes or until used, so I don't have to wait until, I'm about to go into a fight to use these. I can use them in advance. Now, Orbs of the Stream is necessary to being the primary healer in the first dungeon, so this is a must. I've also opened Drown, which does a small amount of damage, but more importantly, this is a silence. Now I'm going to switch gears for just a couple of levels and put my level 17 and first level 18 points into Stroke of Genius. My second level 18 point, as well as my levels 19 and 20 points, are going to Death's Grasp, which increases spell damage. Now this opens up Bound Fate, which is another one that I'll be disregarding, but it also opens up Decay, which is a channeled attack that does moderate damage, but also grants 3 stacks of Lurking Decay, which sits on an enemy until consumed, at which time each stack will do moderate damage to multiple targets. I've also opened up Obliterate, which does moderate damage and consumes the Lurking Decays. Now this is on a 60-second cooldown, but when I have 3 stacks of Lurking Decay on my target, it does massive multi-target damage. I've also opened up Sigil of Power. This is on a 2-minute cooldown, but it will give me back a ton of mana for every Lurking Decay consumed by my Obliterate. So with Decay, Obliterate, and Sigil of Power, I get unbelievable multi-target burst damage every minute and a huge mana return every 2 minutes. So this is really the area in which I start becoming capable of doing some fairly fast DPS, or at least faster, as well as making myself more survivable with less downtime for drinking and such. Oh, and a really nice detail is that although Decay can be interrupted, it does not suffer from pushback. So as long as you don't clip the end of this channel and you don't get interrupted, you'll always get all 3 stacks of Lurking Decay. My next 4 points will go into Still Waters, which reduces the cooldown of Deluge, and my level 24 talent goes to Ripple. This is an instant cast spell that makes all of my single target heals become multi-target heals for the next 6 seconds, and this is exceedingly important to you as a group healer. Now, I've also opened Blessing of the Sea, which gives water breathing. I've opened Well of Life, which is my Resurrect, and Soothing Stream, which is a heal over time that does less healing than Healing Spray, but this stacks up to 4 times. At 4 stacks, this will do more healing than Healing Spray, and I do not have to keep recasting all 4 stacks. If my target has 4 stacks, all I need is 1 cast of Soothing Stream to reset the timer on all 4 stacks. So this also gives me an additional 4 heals over time to go along with my Ripple if I'm multicasting, or 4 heals over time to go along with my Deluge. Now at this point, if you're using this build, you have some choices to make. You're now level 24 and you're a healing machine. So for the rest of this build, I'm going to assume that you're soloing or rifting more than you're running dungeons. And so I'm going to show you the way I did it and begin focusing on my other souls. Now, although you can follow this build exactly and still be the primary healer throughout the leveling process, If you tend to find groups for dungeons quite frequently, then you may want to continue up the Warden soul for a bit longer and come back to the other souls later, just to make it easier on yourself. So my second level 24 talent and my level 25 talent are both going to Death's Grasp. Now I've opened Tyranny, which is similar to Obliterate, but it is not as powerful and sucks up a lot more mana. Now the nice thing though is that it has no cooldown, so if I really need a lot of sustained multi-target damage, I will find it in Tyranny. At level 26, I take Dark Water, which does small burst damage and a little damage over time. This is not a necessary ability to take, but I do like to open fights with it. Now I'm finally moving back over to Inquisitor, and my next 3 points will go to Inner Focus. This has opened up Bolt of Depravity, which unfortunately is worthless to me as a soloer, so I'm disregarding that. My next 5 points go to Unholy Tutelage, which reduces the mana cost of my damaging spells. Now this has opened Armor of Treachery, which increases both my armor and my endurance. Impede slows my enemy, and Purge removes an enemy's buffs. And I'm staying with Inquisitor to put the next 5 points into Fanatic's Faith, which gives me an increase of 20% to my crit damage and healing bonuses. Now this has also opened up Perseverance, giving immunity to fear, and the power that turns me into a multi-target machine. Soul Drain. Soul Drain hits up to 3 enemies in close range for considerable damage, and the damage is then bounced from each enemy to yet another enemy. So if I'm fighting 2 enemies, I hit both with this, and it bounces from one to the other, so I actually hit them each twice. If I'm fighting 3 enemies, I hit them each 3 times, and a lot of times I find that just 2 casts of this can take out 3 enemies. So for the record, I find that it's actually faster to fight 3 enemies now and not just 2. So usually if I have a choice, I'm going to either fight 1 or 3. Now I can take on 4, but the more enemies I add, the harder it is to find time to cast a Soul Drain in between all of the healing that I have to put on myself. So now I'm level 36, and my second 36 plus my 37 to 39 talents go to Entropy, which increases the damage of my damage over time spells. My second 39 talent goes to Curse of Solitude, which gives me one last powerful damage over time ability. Finally, my level 40 talent finishes Entropy, and with that, I now have all the damage that I need to be successful as I push on to level 50. I've also opened up 3 situational powers that I rarely use. And finally, I'm back to finish off the Warden tree. So I put my finishing point into Still Waters, followed by 3 points in Diana's Gift, which increases the healing of my Tidal Surge. 1 point into Cascade, an ability that gives me back 15% of my maximum mana. Overflow, which adds some healing over time when I crit with a heal. And 3 points into Rising Waters, which increases the healing done by Deluge. And finally, Healing Showers, which is another powerful group heal over time. My next 2 points finish Rising Waters, and now I've also opened Curative Waters, which is another cure ability, and Glassy Reflection, which causes an attack on me to reflect back on the attacker. My last point is going to Diana's Gift. Now, I have used this exact spec in endgame dungeons, at least on normal difficulty, and it works fine. It's not the easiest, but it works fine. I can main heal with it. However, I will definitely be respecking out of this and moving over into a full-on Warden spec to do the endgame healing. That said, I'm actually going to hold on to this spec for any soloing that I have to do at level 50 because I'm so familiar with it that it's just easy to do that. So now let's take a minute to just bring it all together. In terms of rotation, it pretty much works like this. For one mob, it's Dark Water, Vex, Sanction Heretic, Curse of Solitude, and then spam Water Jet, unless you're fighting an elite, in which case you'll want to use Vex and Sanction again after the first casts have worn off. Now, I never used any other offensive spells regularly either, so, other than to throw in an Obliterate when I needed mana, so at the early levels I hit Vex and then spammed Water Jet. And then I added Sanction, so it was Vex, Sanction, and Water Jet, and so on and so on. Now, when fighting 3 targets, everything's really different, and you just have to be really reactionary. I usually like to have Orbs of the Stream active before I start. Then I dot everyone, so I'll put Dark Water to start it, and then Vex. And then the next one I'll put a Vex and a Sanction, and then on the third one I'll put a Vex and a Curse of Solitude. And then I hit myself with whatever heals I need until I'm safe to cast Soul Drain. And then I begin healing again until I cast another Soul Drain. And like I said earlier, sometimes 2 Soul Drains will kill them all. Sometimes it takes 3, or sometimes I can just water jet them down for the rest. And the cool thing is that since I'm fighting 3 targets often in this build, that also means that I'm utilizing all of my main healing powers in this build all the time. And so that makes it really easy to transition into a primary group healer situation, which is really important for me because I always had a really hard time transitioning. It's like, what powers do what? Which of these powers should I use in which situations, and what do they do? Well, with this spec, if you're fighting multi-target mobs a lot, you will find that you use all of these healing powers, and it'll make that transition really, really easy so that you can be effective in groups, which was extremely important to me and why I love this build. And that's it for my Warden leveling spec. Check the comments for a link to a written guide on this spec. And thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and have a great day.